The ships appeared without warning. Massive vessels of silver and crystal emerged from empty space near Mars, their forms unlike anything humanity had ever built. They hung there in the darkness, silent and waiting. On Earth, alarms screamed across every military base. Admiral Jiwoo stood in the command center, her eyes fixed on the displays showing the alien fleet. 47 ships, each one larger than Earth's biggest warship. Her hand hovered over the weapons authorization panel. A communication came through. The aliens spoke in perfect English, then switched to Mandarin, then Korean, cycling through 47 different languages. Their message was simple. They came in peace. They called themselves the Galactic Council. Jiwoo kept her weapons hot but held her fire. Something about the aliens felt wrong. Not dangerous, but condescending. Like adults approaching children with candy and expecting gratitude. 3 days later, Ambassador Tae-sung sat across from the alien diplomat in Geneva. The creature called itself Vexithara. It had 8 limbs and a body made of something that looked like living crystal. Light moved through it when it spoke, colors shifting with emotion. Vexithara explained that the Council had watched humanity for decades. Now that Earth had developed dangerous quantum drive technology, it was time for contact. Time for humanity to join the galactic community. Tae-sung listened without expression as the alien presented the terms. Surrender all military vessels. Submit to Council law. Accept technological restrictions. Pay tribute for 100 years as a probationary member. In exchange, humanity would receive protection, trade access, and membership in a civilization spanning 8,000 star systems. The ambassador read through the document slowly. It was written in formal language, but the meaning was clear. Earth would become a vassal state. Not slaves, but not free either. Tae-sung looked up at Vexithara. The alien's crystal body pulsed with colors that probably meant satisfaction. It thought the negotiation was over. That humanity would accept because the alternative was isolation. The ambassador spoke one word. Vexithara's colors flickered in confusion. Perhaps there was a translation error. The alien asked Tae-sung to clarify. Tae-sung stood and activated the broadcast. Every screen on Earth showed his face. Every ship in the Council fleet received his transmission. He spoke clearly. Humanity had survived 2 world wars. They had clawed their way through climate disasters and near extinction. They had spread across 47 star systems without anyone's help. They had built their civilization from blood and determination. They did not do all of that to become someone's subject. Earth's answer to the Council's generous offer was no. Not maybe, not negotiate further. Just Tae-sung ended the transmission and turned back to Vexithara. The alien sat frozen, colors swirling in patterns that suggested complete shock. In 400 years of diplomatic service, across thousands of negotiations, this had never happened. Species begged to join the Council. They offered tribute gladly for the privilege of membership. They understood that a young civilization needed guidance from their elders. Humanity did not understand this. Or worse, they understood perfectly and rejected it anyway. Vexithara tried to explain the benefits again. Advanced medicine, longer lifespans, access to technologies that would take humanity thousands of years to develop alone. Protection from hostile species that would prey on isolated worlds. Tae-sung listened politely. Then he asked a simple question. Had any species ever refused membership and suffered these consequences? Vexithara admitted that no species had ever refused. The ambassador nodded. Then perhaps the threats were not as serious as claimed. The meeting ended badly. Vexithara returned to the flagship confused and angry. The Council delegation gathered to discuss what had gone wrong. They reviewed human history, trying to understand the mistake in their approach. On Earth, Premier Hyojin addressed the planet. She was calm but firm. Humanity would not surrender its freedom for promises of safety. They had learned that lesson too many times in their own history. Every tyrant claimed to offer protection. Every empire promised prosperity in exchange for submission. The answer was no. It would always be no. Admiral Jiwoo watched the Council fleet from her command ship. They were not leaving. They sat in space, waiting for humanity to reconsider. She ordered her battle groups to defensive positions around Earth's colonies. If the aliens wanted to force the issue, humanity would make them regret it. Days passed. The Council sent another message requesting further dialogue. Tae-sung agreed to meet again, but his position had not changed. He would listen to any proposal that treated humanity as equals. Anything else was a waste of time. Vexithera could not comprehend this attitude. The council offered gifts beyond measure. They were not conquerors. They were benefactors. Why could humanity not see the difference? The ambassador explained it simply. A gift comes with no strings attached. What the council offered came with chains, however politely they were presented. Humanity preferred to stand alone rather than kneel in comfort. The alien delegation departed to consult with the wider council. This was unprecedented. They needed guidance on how to proceed. Perhaps the terms were too harsh for such a primitive species. Perhaps humanity needed a better offer to understand the benefits of membership. Vexithara began preparing a revised proposal. Reduced tribute, more favorable terms, additional incentives. Surely humanity would accept when they realized how generous the council could be. This was just a negotiating tactic, the alien believed. All species pushed for better terms at first, but Taesung knew better. This was not a negotiation. This was a statement of principle. Earth would deal with the council as equals or not at all. The ambassador suspected the aliens would take a long time to understand that simple fact. He was right. The council fleet returned after 3 weeks. This time Vexithara brought gifts, actual physical gifts, not just promises. Medical technology that could cure cancer, treatments that extended human life by decades, agricultural systems that could feed billions. Dr. Bora examined the medical equipment in her lab. She was Earth's lead xenobiologist, and this was the first alien technology she had ever touched. It was impressive. The cancer cure worked exactly as advertised. The life extension treatments were genuine. But Bora noticed something else. She ran the specifications through her database. Humanity was developing similar technology, not as refined, but the principles were the same. In 10 years, maybe 15, Earth would have these capabilities without any help. She sent her report to Premier Hyojin. The gifts were real, but they were not the miracle the council claimed. They were simply things humanity would achieve on its own, offered early in exchange for loyalty. Vexithara presented the revised proposal to Ambassador Taesung. The tribute period was reduced from 100 years to 50. Technology sharing would be more generous. The council was being remarkably accommodating by their standards. The ambassador listened to the entire presentation. Then he asked how much Earth would owe for these gifts. Vexithara explained the tribute system again, trying to make it sound reasonable. 50 years was nothing in the span of civilizations. Taesung pulled up financial projections. 50 years of tribute, based on the percentages in the proposal, would transfer approximately 12 trillion credits to the council. That was Earth's entire economic output for a decade. In exchange for technology, humanity would develop anyway. The ambassador called it what it was: protection money. Pay us and we will be generous. Refuse and face consequences. It was an old game that humanity had played many times in its own history. Earth knew how it ended. Premier Hyojin made the rejection public. She broadcast her response to the entire planet and the council fleet. Earth appreciated the gesture, but the answer was still no. Humanity would not become indebted for gifts they did not request. The reaction from the council was immediate and angry. Their colors shifted to patterns that suggested insult and outrage. For 5,000 years, the council had offered membership to younger species. Every single one had accepted gratefully. Everyone except humanity. Vexithara tried to maintain diplomatic composure, but the aliens' frustration was obvious. The council was being generous. They were offering to share knowledge that had taken millennia to accumulate. Why was humanity so stubborn? Taesung explained it again, slowly. Generosity comes with no conditions. What the council offered came with strings attached. Heavy strings that would bind Earth for generations. That was not generosity. That was investment-seeking return. The meeting ended worse than the first one. Vexithara returned to the fleet and reported the failure. The council command debated their next move. Some argued for patience. Others suggested that humanity needed to understand the consequences of isolation. General Kyung-soo watched the council fleet maneuvers from Earth's orbital defense station. The aliens were getting agitated. Their ship formations were shifting from diplomatic to tactical patterns. Not aggressive yet, but preparing for something. He called Admiral Jiwoo. They needed to discuss contingencies. The council might decide that humanity needed a demonstration of their power. Something to make Earth reconsider. The general did not believe the council would attack directly, but there were other ways to apply pressure. Jiwoo agreed. She began dispersing the fleet to defensive positions around all human colonies. The ships moved quietly without announcement. Earth was not looking for a fight, but they were preparing for one. On the council flagship, different species representatives argued about humanity. The debate grew heated. Some species understood Earth's position. They remembered when the council had approached them centuries ago. They had accepted membership because they had no choice, or so they had believed. Now humanity was showing that there was another option. Refuse. Stand alone. Accept the risks of independence rather than the comfort of submission. It was making some council members uncomfortable as they remembered their own first contact. Other species were insulted. Humanity was young, barely 300 years in space. They had no right to refuse the council's generous offer. They needed to be taught humility. A compromise was reached. The council would establish a blockade around Earth's outer colonies. Not an attack, just economic pressure. Show humanity what isolation really meant. Cut off their trade routes and see how long their pride lasted. Vexthara received the orders with mixed feelings. The Arbiter still believed negotiation was possible. But the council had made its decision. The blockade would begin in 1 week. Surely humanity would reconsider when they faced real consequences. On Earth, Premier Hyojin received word of the planned blockade. She called an emergency cabinet meeting. The council was escalating. Earth needed to respond, but carefully. One wrong move could start a war nobody wanted. Ambassador Tae-sung proposed a simple strategy. Ignore the blockade. Keep flying normal routes. Force the council to either shoot civilian ships or back down. The council's reputation was built on being peaceful and civilized. Let them choose between that reputation and their pride. It was risky. But everything about this situation was risky. Humanity had rejected the Galactic Council twice. There was no safe path forward anymore, only choices with different kinds of danger. The cabinet voted. The plan was approved. When the council established their blockade, humanity would treat it like it did not exist. Either the council would blink first or things would get much worse. Earth would find out which soon enough. The council fleet took up positions around Earth's 3 outermost colonies. 28 warships arranged in a perfect blockade formation. Their weapons were powered down, but their presence was unmistakable. No ships would pass without council permission. Captain Sung-ho received the blockade warning on his transport ship, Pioneer's Hope. He was carrying medical supplies to New Sol Colony. 300,000 people lived there. They needed these supplies. The council was between him and his destination. He called Earth Command. Admiral Jiwoo herself answered. Her orders were simple: proceed on course. Do not deviate. Do not respond to threats. The council will not fire on a civilian vessel carrying medicine. Sung-ho hoped she was right. He continued on his route. His crew was nervous, but nobody objected. They had jobs to do. The council blockade was the council's problem, not theirs. On the council interceptor Wind of Justice, Commander Yuna watched the human ship approach. Her captain ordered weapons charged and targeting solutions calculated. The human ship showed no signs of stopping. Yuna had served in the council fleet for 12 years. She had never fired a weapon in anger. The council was a peacekeeping force. They protected member species from pirates and hostile aliens. They did not shoot civilian transports, but the captain was ordering targeting solutions. Yuna entered the commands, her hands moving automatically while her mind questioned everything. What were they doing? This was wrong. Pioneer's Hope crossed the blockade line. Sung-ho broadcast his cargo manifest on open channels. Medical supplies, food supplements, water purification equipment. Nothing military, nothing dangerous. Just supplies for people who needed them. The council ships powered up their weapons, targeting beams locked onto the human vessel. On Wind of Justice, the captain's hand hovered over the fire authorization. 40 minutes of standoff. The human ship did not slow down. The captain blinked first. He ordered his ship to move aside. Wind of Justice shifted position, opening a gap in the blockade. Pioneer's Hope flew through without acknowledging the council vessels. Yuna felt relief and shame in equal measure. Relief that they had not fired. Shame that they had even considered it. What had the council become that they would threaten civilians over diplomatic disputes? More ships came. Human transports, cargo haulers, passenger vessels. All of them flew their normal routes. All of them broadcast their manifests. None of them stopped for the blockade. The Council fleet found itself in an impossible position. They could fire on unarmed civilians, which would make them look like monsters to their own populations, or they could move aside, which would make the blockade meaningless. They chose to move aside, every time, every ship. The blockade became a joke. Council vessels sat in space watching human ships fly past them. It was humiliating. Vexathara received reports of the blockade's failure with growing frustration. The Council had never encountered a species that simply ignored military displays. Humans were supposed to be intimidated. Instead, they acted like the blockade did not exist. The Arbiter called an emergency meeting with the Council command. They needed a new strategy. The blockade was not working. Worse, it was making the Council look weak. Other species were watching. Some were starting to ask uncomfortable questions. If the Council could not enforce a simple blockade against one minor species, what did that say about their power? What did it say about all the other species who had accepted membership without question? On Wind of Justice, Yuna discussed the situation with other officers in private. They all felt the same confusion. The Council always claimed to be the good ones in the galaxy, protectors, peacekeepers, civilizers. But what they were doing to humanity looked a lot like bullying. Trying to force people to accept terms they did not want, using military power to intimidate civilians. When had the Council started doing this? Or had they always been this way and nobody noticed? The blockade lasted 10 days. Then Vexathara received orders to withdraw. The Council was ending the operation and calling it a humanitarian gesture. They would not interfere with the movement of civilian vessels. Everyone knew the truth. The Council had lost. Humanity had called their bluff, and the Council had no response. They could not enforce the blockade without violence, and violence would destroy their reputation as peaceful civilizers. Earth had turned the Council's greatest strength into a weakness. Their commitment to peace meant they could not use force against nonviolent resistance. Humanity had learned that lesson in their own history. Gandhi, Mandela, King. Nonviolent resistance worked against opponents who cared about their image. The Council cared very much about their image. As the Council fleet withdrew, Admiral Jiwoo allowed herself a small smile. First round to humanity, but she knew the Council would try again. They had to. Their entire authority structure was built on the idea that all species eventually submitted to them. Humanity had proven that idea wrong. The Council could not let that stand. They would come back with something else, something harder to resist. Earth needed to be ready. Captain Sung-ho became a folk hero on Earth, the man who broke the blockade. He did not understand what the fuss was about. He had just done his job. Delivered supplies to people who needed them. The aliens were the ones who made it complicated, but that was exactly the point. Humanity saw the situation simply. They had routes to fly, goods to deliver, lives to live. The Council's political games were not their concern. Earth would keep doing what it always did, moving forward regardless of who tried to stop them. The Council changed tactics. Instead of military pressure, they tried economics. A delegation arrived on Earth with proposals for trade agreements. Access to galactic markets, exotic materials that Earth could not produce, technologies for mining and manufacturing that would make humanity wealthy beyond imagination. Minister Jae-hyun studied the proposals carefully. He was Earth's trade minister, and his job was to understand economic traps. This was a sophisticated one. The immediate benefits were real and tempting. The long-term consequences were devastating. The proposal required Earth to adopt Council currency for galactic trade. Accept regulations written by the Council. Open human systems to Council corporations with minimal restrictions. In exchange, Earth would get access to markets spanning 8,000 star systems. Jae-hyun ran projections. Within 5 years, Council corporations would dominate key Earth industries. Within 10 years, Earth's economy would be dependent on Council trade networks. Within 20 years, the Council would effectively control human economic policy without firing a shot. It was colonization by another name. Instead of military conquest, they would use economics. Make Earth rich enough to become addicted to wealth, then slowly take control through financial leverage. Ambassador Tae-sung met with the Council trade delegation. Their leader was Zilkrath, an insectoid creature that represented the consortium. the largest corporate entity in council space. Silkrath did not care about politics, only profit. The alien explained the benefits with obvious enthusiasm. Earth's rare minerals would fetch premium prices in council markets. Human manufacturing could expand exponentially with access to new technologies. Everyone would prosper. Taesung asked about the ownership restrictions. Why did council corporations need more than 50% ownership in human industries? Silkrath explained that this was standard practice. Established corporations knew how to operate efficiently in galactic markets. Human companies would benefit from council expertise. The ambassador pushed harder. What happened to species that became economically dependent on the council? Silkrath hesitated, then admitted that such species typically faced significant economic pressure if they ever tried to change the terms. But that would not happen with Earth, the alien assured. Everyone always prospered under council trade agreements. Taesung had heard enough. He thanked Silkrath for the honest answer. The alien had accidentally revealed the trap. Get species dependent on council economics, then use that dependency to control their policies. It was a strategy as old as commerce itself. Premier Hyojin called a cabinet meeting to discuss the proposal. Some ministers were tempted. The economic benefits were enormous. Earth could solve poverty, fund massive infrastructure projects, accelerate technological development. All they had to do was sign the agreement. Minister Jaehyun presented his analysis. Yes, the immediate benefits were real, but in 20 years, Earth would be an economic colony. The Council would not need military force to control humanity. They would simply threaten to cut off trade access. Earth would have no choice but to comply. The debate lasted for hours. Finally, Premier Hyojin made the decision. Reject the proposal. But do not just refuse. Make a counteroffer. Show the Council what real equal partnership looked like. Taesung presented Earth's counterproposal to the Council delegation. Bilateral trade agreements on equal terms. Both human and Council currencies accepted. Foreign ownership limited to 25%. Mutual benefit, mutual respect, mutual sovereignty. The Council delegation laughed. They actually laughed. Silkrath explained patiently that minor species did not dictate terms to the Council. Earth could accept the generous offer or remain isolated. Those were the only options. Taesung stood to leave. He thanked the delegation for their time. If those were the only options, Earth chose isolation. Humanity had built their economy without Council help. They would continue to do so. Silkrath realized too late that the humans were serious. The alien tried to backtrack, suggesting that perhaps some terms could be negotiated. But Taesung was already walking out. The meeting was over. News of the rejection spread across Council space. Member species watched in amazement as humanity turned down access to the largest trade network in known space. Some thought Earth was foolish. Others began to wonder if their own trade agreements were as beneficial as they had been told. Vexithara received reports of growing unrest among some Council members. Species were starting to ask uncomfortable questions. Why did they have to give up so much sovereignty for trade access? Why were Council corporations allowed to dominate their economies? Had they really had no choice when they joined? Humanity was becoming a problem in ways the Council had not anticipated. By refusing membership, Earth was making other species question the system. The Council's authority was built on the assumption that membership was the only rational choice. Earth kept proving that assumption wrong. On Earth, Minister Jae-hyun felt satisfied with the outcome. Yes, humanity had turned down significant wealth, but they had kept their independence. In his long career, he had learned that freedom was worth more than money. Earth would find its own path to prosperity. The Council would try something else. They always did, but each attempt revealed more about their true nature. The generous benefactors were starting to look more like controlling manipulators. And the galaxy was beginning to notice. Premier Hyojin addressed Earth after the economic proposal fell apart. She was honest with her people. The decision to refuse had cost them potential wealth. Life would be harder in the short term. But in the long term, they had preserved something more valuable than credits: the right to make their own choices. Humanity accepted the decision. They had never expected the easy path anyway. Earth's history was full of hard choices made for the sake of freedom. This was just another one. They would manage just like they always had. The Council tried a different approach: culture. They proposed a cultural exchange program. Council artists and scholars would visit Earth. Human representatives would visit Council worlds. No politics, no economics. Just mutual understanding through art and knowledge. Premier Hyojin saw no harm in it. Culture could not colonize anyone. She approved the program. Earth selected their best representatives. Musicians, artists, scientists, writers. People who could show the galaxy what humanity had achieved. The council representatives arrived on Earth first. They were famous in their own civilizations. Master artists, renowned scholars, celebrated poets. They came expecting to teach primitive humans about proper culture. Plixaron was a famous sculptor from an avian species. 200 years old and celebrated across 50 worlds. The alien visited Earth's art museums expecting to see crude attempts at creativity. What Plixaron found instead shook everything the artist believed. Human art had emotion. Raw, powerful emotion that the council had forgotten in their pursuit of technical perfection. Paintings that made Plixaron feel things the alien had not experienced in decades. Sculptures that spoke of struggle and triumph and loss and hope. The council had spent thousands of years refining their culture. They had achieved technical mastery in every art form. But somewhere along the way they had lost the passion that made art meaningful. Humans still had it. Meanwhile, on the council capital world, Sujin prepared for her performance.
She was a violinist, 27 years old, and she had been selected to represent human music.
The venue was the Grand Amphitheater, which seated 15,000 aliens from dozens of species. Sujin played a piece she had composed specifically for this occasion. It started soft and built to something powerful. She poured everything into it. The fear of first contact, the pride of standing alone, the hope for eventual understanding. The music spoke what words could not. The audience sat in stunned silence when she finished. Then they erupted. Not polite applause, but genuine emotional response. Some were crying. The council had not heard music like this in centuries.
Technical perfection was common.
Emotional truth was rare. Professor Dongwu faced a different challenge. He was a quantum physicist presenting his research at the Galactic Science Summit. Council scientists filled the auditorium, ready to evaluate the primitive human's work with polite condescension. Dongwu presented a new theory about quantum entanglement that challenged 3,000 years of accepted council physics. The initial reaction was dismissive. Impossible, the council scientists said. The math did not work that way. Then Dongwu demonstrated it with live experiments. The impossible happened right in front of them. The council scientists sat in shocked silence as their fundamental understanding of quantum mechanics was proved incomplete. Within days, council physicists were racing to revise their theories. 3,000 years of accepted science had to be updated because a human from a species barely 300 years in space had seen something they had missed. Back on Earth, a council poet named Miralax made a terrible mistake. During a public performance, the alien dismissed human literature as childish and unsophisticated. The comment was broadcast across Earth and went viral. Humanity's response was overwhelming. Writers flooded council networks with works that proved Miralax wrong. Poetry, novels, essays, plays. The sheer volume and quality was staggering. The council had assumed humans were culturally primitive. They were very, very wrong. Vexathera watched recordings of human cultural achievements on council worlds with growing concern. The Arbiter had assumed humanity was technologically behind and culturally immature. Both assumptions were being shattered daily. Humans were not primitive. They were different. They approached problems from angles the council never considered. They had passion the council had forgotten. They innovated while the council refined. The cultural exchange was supposed to show humanity what they were missing by refusing council membership. Instead, it was showing the council what they had lost in their millennia of comfortable stability: innovation, risk-taking, emotional honesty, the willingness to challenge accepted wisdom. Plixaron returned to Earth's art museums again and again. The alien sculptor had come to teach but stayed to learn. Human art was raw and imperfect by council standards, but it was alive in ways council art had not been for centuries. Other council representatives reported similar experiences. Human philosophy questioned assumptions the council had accepted for millennia. Human music stirred emotions council composers had forgotten how to express. Human science approached problems with fresh perspectives that led to breakthroughs. The cultural exchange became a crisis for the council. They had sent their best to demonstrate cultural superiority. Instead, Their representatives were coming back changed, questioning, wondering if the council way was the only way, or even the best way. Ambassador Tae-sung watched the situation with satisfaction. Earth had not sought to prove superiority. They had simply shown who they were, honest, passionate, creative, questioning. The galaxy was seeing humanity clearly for the first time. Bexathera called an end to the cultural exchange program. Officially, the arbiters cited scheduling conflicts. Unofficially, the council was panicking. Humanity was not just refusing to submit, they were offering an alternative vision of what galactic civilization could be. Premier Hyojin accepted the program's end gracefully. The point had been made. Humanity did not need the council to validate their culture. They had something worth sharing on its own merits, something the galaxy was hungry for, even if the council leadership was not ready to admit it. The council made one final attempt to demonstrate superiority. Military exercises. Joint war games in neutral space. The council would show humanity the massive gap in military capability. Surely then Earth would understand the need for council protection. Admiral Jiwoo received the invitation with interest. She saw opportunity where the council saw intimidation. War games would let her study council tactics and doctrine. She accepted immediately. The exercise began in a star system chosen for its strategic complexity. Asteroid fields, gas giants, multiple gravity wells. The council fleet consisted of 50 ships. Admiral Jiwoo brought 15. The council commanders smiled at the numbers. This would be quick. The scenario was simple. Capture the flag. Each side had a command ship designated as the target. Disable it or force its surrender to win. Standard weapons fire only. No live ammunition. The council had designed the exercise to showcase their superior numbers and coordination. Jiwoo studied the council fleet formation as the exercise began. Perfect geometric patterns. Textbook deployment. Every ship exactly where doctrine said it should be. Beautiful, disciplined, and completely predictable. She ordered her ships to break formation immediately. Human vessels scattered in what looked like chaos to the council observers. No pattern, no geometric precision. The council commanders thought the humans were panicking. Then the human ships executed a maneuver the council had never seen. A feint within a feint within a feint. Council vessels moved to intercept what they thought was the main attack. It was bait. The real assault came from completely unexpected vectors. 30 minutes into the exercise, human forces captured the council command ship. The council commanders called it luck. Jiwoo suggested a rematch. They agreed, confident they would adapt. The second exercise had different parameters. Different scenario, different starting positions. Jiwoo used completely different tactics. She won in 25 minutes. The council commanders stopped calling it luck. 5 more exercises followed. Different conditions, different objectives, different variables. Humanity won all of them, not by superior technology or overwhelming force, but by superior tactics and adaptability. The council fought by the book. Humans rewrote the book mid-battle. General Kyung-soo reviewed the exercise recordings with his staff. He pointed out the pattern. The council military had not faced a real challenge in centuries. They had grown comfortable, complacent. Their tactics worked against pirates and minor threats. Against a peer opponent with creativity and determination, those same tactics were predictable and exploitable. Humanity had learned warfare the hard way. 2 world wars, countless smaller conflicts, centuries of military evolution. Earth knew that battles were won by adaptation and risk-taking, not by following doctrine. The council had forgotten those lessons. They had achieved peace through overwhelming force for so long that they had forgotten how to actually fight. Their strength was in numbers and technology, not in tactical innovation. The Council Military Command held emergency meetings after the exercises. They were forced to confront an uncomfortable truth. In a real war, humanity would be a serious threat. Earth had less than 1% of the Council's military strength, but they fought with a sophistication the Council had not seen in millennia. Worse, other species had watched the war games. Member species with their own military forces saw how humans defeated superior numbers through superior tactics. Some began wondering if their own fleets could do the same. Bexathera received the military reports with deep concern. Every attempt to demonstrate Council superiority had backfired. The blockade had failed. The economic proposal had been rejected. The cultural exchange had challenged Council assumptions. Now their military invincibility was questioned. The Arbiter began to understand something important. The Council had built their authority on assumptions that humanity kept disproving. They assumed younger species needed guidance. Earth proved they could thrive independently. They assumed their culture was superior. Humans showed culture was not about age, but about vitality. They assumed their military was unbeatable. Humanity demonstrated that skill mattered more than numbers. Every assumption was being challenged. Every attempt to force submission was failing. The Council had never encountered a species like this, one that simply refused to accept the Council's view of how the galaxy should work. Admiral Jiwoo returned to Earth satisfied with the results. She had learned valuable intelligence about Council military capabilities. More importantly, she had sent a message. If the Council ever decided to use force against Earth, it would not be the easy victory they assumed. Premier Hyojin received reports of unrest in Council space. Some member species were openly questioning their membership terms. Others were requesting changes to their agreements. A few were even making quiet inquiries about what Earth had done differently. Humanity had not tried to destabilize the Council. They had simply refused to submit. But that refusal was having ripple effects across the galaxy. Species that had accepted Council authority without question were starting to ask why. The answer was usually that they had never considered there was an alternative. Earth was showing them an alternative existed. Independence was possible. Sovereignty could be maintained. The Council's offers could be refused. And life went on. The galaxy was watching, and the Council was losing control of the narrative they had maintained for 5,000 years. The Galactic Council chambers erupted in chaos. Representatives from 312 species argued over what to do about humanity. Some demanded stronger action. Others praised Earth's independence. A few quietly approached human diplomats about separate agreements. Vexathera watched the disorder with something close to despair. In 400 years of service, the Arbiter had never seen the Council this divided. Humanity had done what no hostile force could do. They had made the Council question itself. The Arbiter reviewed everything that had happened. 6 months of contact with Earth. 6 failed attempts to integrate them. Each failure had exposed weaknesses in the Council's approach. Weaknesses that other species were now noticing. Vexthara had believed the Council's narrative completely. They were benevolent. They offered membership out of generosity. They maintained peace and prosperity across 8,000 star systems. All of this was true. But humanity had forced the Arbiter to see the other side. The Council also demanded submission. They required tribute and obedience. They used economic pressure and military intimidation. They assumed superiority based on age rather than merit. These things were also true. The Council was not evil, but they were not perfect either. Humanity had simply refused to pretend otherwise. A communication came from Earth. Ambassador Tae-sung requested a meeting with Vexathara. Private, no other diplomats. The Arbiter agreed. Curious what humanity wanted after 6 months of rejections. They met in a neutral space station, just the two of them. Tae-sung brought a proposal. Not terms of surrender, not another rejection. A framework for actual cooperation between equals. Earth proposed a bilateral alliance, mutual defense against external threats, open trade with protections for both sides, cultural exchange without condescension, technology sharing based on mutual benefit, complete sovereignty for all parties. The revolutionary part came next. Humanity offered the same terms to any Council member species that wanted them. Not as a bloc through the Council, as individual nations dealing with other individual nations. Earth was essentially breaking the Council's monopoly on galactic diplomacy. Vexathera understood the implications immediately. If the Council accepted these terms, they would have to reform how they treated all species. If they rejected the terms, some member species might pursue separate agreements with Earth anyway. The Council's absolute authority would fracture. The Arbiter asked why Earth was doing this. After 6 months of resistance, why offer cooperation now? Tae-sung answered simply. Humanity never wanted isolation. They wanted partnership. The Council kept offering subordination instead. This proposal was what Earth had wanted from the beginning. Vexathera returned to the Council chambers with Earth's proposal. The debate was intense and painful. Traditional Council members saw it as unacceptable. Younger species representatives saw it as overdue reform. The arguments lasted for days. Premier Hyojin watched the council deliberations from Earth. She knew they were discussing more than just relations with humanity. They were discussing the entire structure of galactic civilization, whether it would remain a hierarchy with the council at the top, or evolve into something more equal. Reports came in of member species making quiet contact with Earth. 12 species had requested copies of the bilateral alliance proposal. They wanted to study it, perhaps negotiate their own agreements. The council noticed and grew more alarmed. Vexithara spoke before the full council assembly. The arbiter laid out the choice plainly: accept Earth's framework and reform the council system, or reject it and watch their authority slowly fragment as species realized they had alternatives. The arbiter admitted something that shocked the chamber. In 400 years of negotiations, this was the first time failure had taught more than success. The council had succeeded so often that they had stopped questioning their approach. Humanity forced them to question everything. Perhaps that was necessary. The vote was called. It was close, far closer than anyone expected, but Earth's proposal was accepted with modifications. Humanity would not join the council. Instead, they would establish the first true bilateral alliance between Earth and the council as equal partners. Other species could negotiate similar agreements if they chose. The council would no longer have exclusive control over galactic diplomacy. It was a fundamental change to how the galaxy worked. Within weeks, 18 species requested renegotiation of their council membership terms. The council had to choose: adapt or fracture. They chose adaptation, though not happily. The changes humanity had forced were only beginning. Ambassador Taesung and Arbiter Vexithara signed the cooperation treaty in a ceremony broadcast across the galaxy. They stood as representatives of equal civilizations, not master and servant, not elder and child, just two peoples agreeing to work together while respecting each other's sovereignty. Vexithara spoke honestly during the ceremony. In 400 years of diplomatic success, the Arbiter had never learned as much as from 6 months of failure with humanity. Earth's gift to the galaxy was not acceptance of the existing order. It was proof that alternatives were possible. Taesung responded with equal honesty. Humanity had not sought to destroy the council or challenge their authority. They had simply refused to surrender their freedom. If that refusal led to positive change for others, then something good had come from the conflict. On Earth, people celebrated not because they had won, but because they had maintained their principles. The easy path would have been to accept the council's first offer. Give up some freedom for security and prosperity. Earth had chosen the hard path instead. Keep their freedom and build their own future. Admiral Jiwoo stood on the bridge of her flagship and watched council ships pass on friendly patrols. They were allies now, partners against common threats, but they were not subjects. Earth had established a new model for how younger and older civilizations could interact. As equals, the galaxy would never be quite the same. The Council's absolute authority was broken, not destroyed but limited. Species had alternatives now. They could negotiate, refuse, demand better terms. The hierarchy was becoming something more complex and equal. Humanity had not set out to change the galaxy. They had simply insisted on being treated with respect. Sometimes that was all it took. One species refusing to kneel could inspire others to stand up. Premier Hyojin's final address to Earth was simple and honest. They had faced the most powerful civilization in the galaxy and refused to submit, not through violence but through stubborn insistence on their own worth. Earth had proven that freedom was not given by others. It was claimed and defended by those brave enough to stand for it. The Galactic Council was no longer in chaos, but it was in transition. Change was coming whether they wanted it or not. And it had all started because one species said no and meant it.